The spirit of adventure is the one thing most heroes strive to achieve. One that gives us reason to keep moving forward even when the sands of time start to show their age. The case of what happened when Carl Fredricksen grew up in the movie known as Up, where Pixar decided to really aim for the heart by aging up their protagonist to see through his perspective of life for the call of adventure he and his wife Ellie sought after being inspired by none other than the film's antagonist himself, Charles Muntz. Where of course you already know why I'm talking about him as another villain that is worth continuing to mention, letting that spirit of adventure consume him in the wrong way. Not an overall evil threatening force, except for an obvious few actions against our heroes, but how his time in the jungle forced him to become a lost soul, a lost villain you might presume. And what I mean by him being a lost villain is the simple fact that we have a man who searched for a lost bird for a long time, who resided in Paradise Falls and actually became lost within himself, chasing after an obsession that was almost never there until the very end of his life. He is about 92 years old by the time he was reintroduced in the majority of the film, one of the oldest villains Disney or Pixar has ever introduced, of course counting beings who primarily are humans. That this age reflects both on the hero and villain of the film to search for something you didn't think was there. The goal of continuing to make your adventure to live rather than chase an idea that doesn't fulfill you in the end, in a parallel that is just so perfect for the entire story. Where both of them are obvious from the chasing of a similar dream in Paradise Falls, their old age, and their name itself. Where if you didn't know, the name Carl is also a Germanic form of the name Charles, showing that he does represent the dark side of Carl himself. So when you look back upon villains like him, you really look back upon the dark side of our own spirits, what we choose to do after a loss and what that guides us to live, whether it be a certain item or more importantly in this case a loved one that makes it virtually hard for us to move forward in that life. Just like me who keeps talking about these same characters so much often so I can live another day on this dang site. But with that all said, we have to start back at the beginning to discover how not to succumb to become a lost soul. This is obviously where we have to enter the eyes of a young Carl who looked up to his hero Charles Muntz in the 1930s, who had inspired generations of kids to have hope and discover that adventure was indeed out there. That the image of this man was one that could actually make the impossible possible, with his team of dogs having inventions beyond that of the common man to travel the globe and find exotic creatures and brand new discoveries that could change the face of this earth. Well, maybe not actually that far, but you understand the picture they were going for that inspired Carl, that the villain who isn't the villain quite yet is the one who inspired the certain events of the film. But how one event changed everything when his peers discovered that the bones of the monster of Paradise Falls he so proclaimed to saw were deemed an actual fake, making him a disgrace in the eyes of the public media, revoking his membership in the National Explorer Society. And while he accepted such a fate, he still felt so humiliated and promised to pursue the real monster with proof as long as he could clear his name. The number one driving factor for the entire plot moving forward in the story, and one that will eventually reflect on the younger Carl with Ellie. Again, how they make you see the parallel at the very beginning with Carl being so inspired by him and against all naysayers who proved them otherwise. The idolization that can work in any direction for this person or the overall idea of adventure, discovering that within another person. The part of the film exploring both Ellie's and Carl's relationship and how they both looked up to Charles with that same spirit of adventure in the dream of Paradise Falls. One that actually makes you realize the heart of the entire movie, the goal that should be attained in life, as we are led to focus on Paradise Falls as that supposed subject, and how you wouldn't find that out to be told until you get to the climax of the film that encourages you to fight on. That we as an audience here are meant to focus on Carl's life first because his experience has yet to begin, rather than someone who already started out as an adult like Muntz and finally on the path he needs to commit to his very part. That you need to feel what life could be about first before you reach that certain point and desire that makes you think what should be done. That you forget Charles Muntz as a character because at this point he never returned home, seeing two people instead grow up in the world that does actually get the most attention rather than a man trapped in a jungle nobody really cares to think about. That he is both lost in time and lost in a place because he's just too damn focused on this one singular species that either does or does not exist. In fact, fact, it almost takes an hour into the movie just to finally see him once again to drive into this point of the adventure Carl has to make across the way, about the steps you have to take to go above and beyond to find that same journey, flying off to search that adventure when society deems you not fit to serve, way past your prime when the circle of life must move on. Because when he first moved his house to Paradise Falls, he had to deal with two major things: the introduction of the bird that we saw at the very beginning being Kevin, and of course the Boy Scout Russell from earlier on who hitched a ride on his house. Two things that provide us with a new avenue of living after the entire beginning showed us this huge chunk of life that we already had and then eventually lost. Acceptance is the key word we have to learn here, but one that isn't in the vocabulary of the movie itself. Because you know, most grumpy men just don't do that, at least with the attitude that's displayed in this film from beginning to end. But I like how this movie tricks you at first when you do see Charles Muntz again. Of course you know he's an old man now, but it's more of the fact that he appears normal, not deranged that we know of, but actually a smart old man who has an army of talking dogs and a huge blimp that has a comfortable lifestyle. Like when you see his blimp and his collection of artifacts, you realize he does live a luxurious type of lifestyle in a blimp even though he's trapped down here in Paradise Falls, where you can clearly see he's also trained all these dogs to help him manage to live for a long time. They have collars that allow them to talk and they're able to commit tasks like bring him wine or whatever. Resources that truly last more than a lifetime and showing us an enlarged version of the comfortable life Carl used to live, taking his house to Paradise Falls, but also with a hidden element that has yet to be unleashed. This is part of the genius of slowly revealing the villain inside this one particular scene, twisting us for the fact that he still lives on, but also gradually revealing the dreaded conversation he sought for about 70 years at this point, where you begin to see that once his mind goes back to the one thing he searched for at the very beginning, you understand he is a shell of his former self, affected by the word fraud by those who deemed him so that long ago, who are really dead if you think about it. That currently, it's his mission to find this bird at all costs, and anyone who comes in across him is there to take that away from him. The bitterness that affects his heart because they lost something that was very important to their lives and would do anything to bring that back, including removing anyone who stands in their way regardless of their own background. It's a divide that starts to change things in Carl with this initial grumpy old man into a worried one, since they know he has this bird that he's been after, but also knowing that this course of time and loneliness sheltered himself in this one area and hardened his heart from enjoying anyone's company, where the last time he truly interacted with people was when they deemed him a fraud. So his connection to humanity currently has been on the rough side, even if he does welcome in at first until he gets triggered by the thought of anyone else having Kevin. And without telling you, it demonstrates how much of a threat he's become by alluding to two people he's killed before aiming to Carl as the very next victim, wanting nobody to stand in his way at the slightest hint of interaction with a bird. What was a brief interaction with a kind old man who has plentiful resources has now turned into a cold dark monster of Paradise Falls, the actual monster instead of the one we were chasing after this whole time. Nothing even matters except for the one thing that makes you lost. That again, he reminds us, or more likely Carl in this situation, the importance of living your life, finding adventure out there when he chose to save his home rather than helping Kevin. Like the minute you see him do that in this one scene happening in the film, you begin to feel like Carl is choosing the same exact path that Charles had done, valuing a house over saving a rare endangered bird who's only there to protect her children as the only real thing that even mattered to his heart. Where as long as Ellie has had her house stationed in Paradise Falls, that will be the one thing that fulfills him even after her own death. But how again we go back earlier to how we witnessed the married life sequence of them enjoying that part of their time together that was also cataloged in this adventure book, that reminding that we did indeed find this adventure, that no matter what actually happened during their trials and tribulations, they always stuck by each other's side, living each day as the only thing that was really important at all, rather than the idea Carl took by flying the house to Paradise Falls. And how it is revealed at the end of the book that Ellie thanked Carl for the adventure and told him to create a brand new one, where it is truly important to highlight this because it's the deciding factor that showed Carl dealing with the darker half of his obsession, chasing dreams that are already obsolete and unnecessary to continue your own life when you already found a group that allows you to carry on. It is one that truly is a choice between life and death, as Muntz grows even more obsessive and deranged, trying to stop all of them at all costs to save his prize ticket home to a society that doesn't even know he exists anymore, that anything he does at this point will be all for nothing because he probably was deemed dead by society. You are just reminded time after time with each scene he's in that he's a paranoid freak willing to risk a child's life for the preservation of this one prize that will mean nothing at all. An angry old man who holds nothing in his heart but contempt for everyone who shamed him long ago. Like, even we see at this point with his battle with Fredricksen that he cares not for his other prize collection he found over the course of time. The very things he took so good care of his whole life that helped him create the image people knew him as in this optimist in the spirit of adventure just does not matter anymore while attempting to kill another old man as the only mission left. I mean, you gotta give him credit for going this strong when he's like in his 90s compared to Carl, who's only 78, with a 14-year age gap of just seeing two men battle out for a damn bird, and just how that spirit can actually go either way, whether pursuing a dream on the dark side or the light side of both spectrums. I mean, in a way, you can call him more a machine than a man. Not for the fact that he has mechanical parts at all, but a cold dark heart who's only here for one mission and will not stop no matter the cost. His mind is truly fully made up. The only way to defeat such a force is just to let it die. To burn the dark side at all costs, as we refer to him as such, to parallel Carl. To preserve the sanity you had left where he has none. Because you have to remember at the end of the film, in order to defeat them, he had to carry a loaded hunting rifle to stop Kevin, Russell, and Doug, using a gun to try to take down a child, an endangered bird, and a talking dog, which means he had to be stopped. But there's only so much you can do while chasing a dream before you fall, where that is exactly what happens to his fate, and frankly dies as a result. Pete Docter, the director of the film, did try out many different endings for this character, including redeeming him as a parallel to Carl to try to save him, but how it didn't work, and tried again, making him lost forever in this world, trapped in Ellie and Carl's house, flying up, and then finally to the falling down part.
He is, in a way, the inciting incident for what got Carl and Ellie going. You know, he is the representation of what they want to be. In the end, we figured, all right, as almost a representation of Carl's old self, Muntz has to die. You have to look at these films as almost a hierarchy of the most important is your main character and his needs. And Muntz's story has to support Carl's story. And so if Carl, that part of him needs to die off, then that's what Muntz, as a reflection of that, that's his job in the story.
Where this is the right choice because it represents the most important part for our main character to live, reminding us that his story is to be told and he needs to be the focus of who's with him rather than what's against him. Finally learning to let go of his house as that real representation of Ellie and all that he originally strived for, so that he can move on to the next stage. And overall, Muntz is just a villain that shows how far a human can succumb to obsession and fall if they find themselves lost in a desire. To desire a life you had rather than a life you could have lived, and how that could be all for nothing if you let yourself go that far. That you will forever be lost if you don't learn how to move on, that many others would not care for at all. The one thing that just stops you from moving forward, which pains even the ones that love you. Where Up teaches us to live each day to be present in each other's lives, where that can be the best feeling in the world. To learn to discover that adventure is truly out there if we seek it in our own hearts. And we should probably be fine if that is the choice we make. And that is something I couldn't agree more with. So I'm all done. Goodbye.